All right, we are live. All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Kente Korner, your favorite casual Hoya basketball podcast. I'm Bobby Bancroft, and I'm here with Marcus Washington. After Georgetown just lost its first game of the season, losing to Northwestern 75-63, Hoyas were led by Primo Spears, their leading scorer this season so far. He had 22. Jay Heath made his Georgetown debut with 13 points off the bench. And, Northwestern basically wore them down. The Hoyas were up two at the half. And the second half, Georgetown just could not get right defensively. A lot of what we've seen in the last couple of years, right? Open threes in the corner, the press getting broken for threes, trading twos for threes, Georgetown not winning a game when they can't get into the 80s. Chris Collins, I think most people my age and your age think of him as a Duke basketball player. He's been at Northwestern for 10 years, which is crazy to think. And, he said, look, we want to slow them down and we want to, maximize our possessions. We don't want to go in on Wahab and Cook. And it worked perfectly.
Yeah, I thought that run in the second half was where coaching really did take place, where Collins knew what sets to run. Like he said, he did. He ran the clock down, made Georgetown play offense, made them play long possessions. Georgetown did try to speed up the pace, but couldn't because you can't make shots and you end up turning the ball over. And only thing it did was help Northwestern achieve what they wanted to achieve.
Yeah, so Northwestern finished 14 for 33 from deep. Georgetown was just 7 for 22. That's really the game there. They almost lost to Coppin the same way. Coppin forced an extra 5 minutes. They made 13 threes. I think they attempted more. But, college basketball 2022-23 season, if you're going to give up that many threes and that many open threes, it's going to be hard to win. So we know Kevin Nickelberry is now in charge of the defense. What are you seeing differently? Are you seeing anything? I guess you ask, are you seeing anything differently?
Yeah, well, the three-quarter court and the full court stuff is definitely something different. And I'm wondering how much in the second half of today's game, when things got tight, did Patrick take over the defense and not necessarily Nickelberry, because it looked more like they went to a scheme of last year, which was kind of light pressure. When you suck into, they like the wall in the lane, which is why you have the open threes, especially in the corners. And in 2022, 2023, You cannot give up open corner threes to a lot of teams on the college level. And you would think a guy who came from the NBA where corner threes are king, that schematically you'd want to do something defensively where that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Again, Chris Collins, I thought was pretty interesting post game. I don't know if you were there, part of it, but when we were kind of we were sitting courtside, which is an incredible seat, incredible angle. So Collins ran over to get on the coach's show. Ran over, got on the headset. He's talking, and they brought over. How do you say his last name? Chase Assange. They brought him over, and he's like, "Hey, can I look at a stat sheet?" I was like, "Of course." He was like, "How many blocks did a Cook have?" And I was like, 3. He's like, "Man, I felt like he blocked me 8 times." And Collins had mentioned, he's like, "How, what are you doing to get these open threes?" And he's like, "We can't go in on Wahab and a Cook." And so if that's your strength, how do they figure out a way to play? Do you have to kind of give something away, or like how is it that you can have this strong inside where you're protecting the rim, but then you've also your strategy for threes can't be just I hope they miss.
Yeah, and
right, and it seems like that's what they do sometimes.
Right, and I think it all starts with Georgetown's inability to keep people out of the lane. Tonight was another example where Northwestern got 2 feet in the lane constantly. Georgetown does not push sideline baseline. I don't know if that's something where Patrick wants them not to or whatever the case may be, but they're getting broken down and open threes are happening because teams get 2 feet in the lane. And this is where college is different from the NBA is you can build a whole defensive scheme pushing sideline baseline because there's no illegal defense rules and those type of things. It seems like Georgetown doesn't want to do it. And it's not like Georgetown is coming out with these lofty pack line type of characteristics. I can understand if at UVA that's happening because their whole defensive scheme is built around it happening, which is why they can do that but still not give up a million threes because it's the pack line principles. But Georgetown is using conventional principles and giving up 2 feet in the lane. And until the 2 feet in the lane thing stops, they're going to struggle with teams making threes throughout the season.
Yeah, I mean, for me at the half, it was kind of a little bit game of runs. I know that there's a viral play basically where both teams were just fumbling the ball all over the place, and it kind of picked up steam. I think Matt Norlander at CBS had it, and some other people had it, and it wasn't great. But there was some up and down, back and forth. Northwestern closed it to 2 at the half, and for me, the biggest problem was you're Georgetown, you're up 35-33, you're holding Northwestern to 28% shooting. It's like, okay, this seems like a problem. And they come out second half, they shoot 8 for 15 from three, 53%. You know, I don't like to break it down as simple as like, how did threes go? But that kind of is the first thing I always look at, right? It's hard to win if you're going to play this way. Like, Georgetown took 22 threes, Northwestern made 14.
Right. And part of it is that if you're starting your offense taking the ball out the basket in today's basketball, you're not going to be very good on offense. And Georgetown in the second half wasn't very good on offense. Even Patrick said it at the post game that the offense was stagnant. Well, it's hard to run an offense and get in a flow if I'm always having to walk the ball up the floor because I can't stop the other team from scoring. And that's why you got the Primo Spears kind of dribbling the air out the ball, or you're trying to run screen and roll with Qudus Wahab 25 feet from the basket that ends in a travel in the lane by Wahab. Those things are happening because defensively, you're not taking care of business on that end.
What do you think their best offense is through 3 games? I mean, I know it does seem like Primo Spears dribbles the air out of the ball a lot, but he willed them the Coppin State win. And there's times, I mean, look, he's 9 for 20. He sat for a minute and 1 second. Okay, I guess I don't want to go into too many different ways. Let's just talk about Primo though. But that seems like kind of their best offense, like balls in Primo's hand, pick and roll with him. And what do you think is the best way for him,
Well,
or the best way for Georgetown?
Well, for Georgetown, Ewan spoke about wanting 2 and 3 passes and wanting ball reversals. Well, what are you setting up and what's in your playbook that encourages that? We saw Collins at ATOs getting open shots and getting the ball in the hands in the spots of the player that he wanted to. Georgetown, with an ATO, got a banked in 2-pointer at the end of a shot clock on a ball that had no rotation from Primo Spears.
Right.
And that is a big difference. Is what are you doing? What is something that you can go that is your pet, that when you've given up 6 or 8 straight points that you go to, that ensures that you're going to get a ball reversal to an open 3 or a ball reversal and get downhill to get some more touches, as opposed to, oh my goodness, they've scored 6 or 9 straight points. I need to do something individually to stop the run. And that's what we saw in the second half, which is how Northwestern got up by 10.
So obviously, as everyone knows, Georgetown's team is pretty much made up of mainly transfers. That's who mainly plays. I think it's not really fair to count Wahab as a transfer because he did start here and they recruited him out of high school, but you know what I mean? So they're starting 4 completely new guys. Heath got, activated today. Post game, Patrick Ewing, we talked a little bit about Brandon Murray's struggles. And one of the things I was a little bit surprised was with Brandon Murray's struggles, he still got to play 38 minutes. Do you think Brandon Murray offensively affected Brandon Murray defensively today?
Yeah, I think in the second half it did. In the first half, I thought there was still effort there.
Yeah.
In the second half, there was no effort there. He was definitely letting his struggles, especially after he missed the layup, drive what he was doing on the defensive end. And that's just something that cannot happen, especially in a game that's still up in the balance. You just got to lock into, let me get this back on the defensive end, as opposed to sort of that woe is me. And like you said, being at courtside, what you could see the body language of Brandon Murray. And it was, at times it was almost like sad, because you could see as the game went on, it just grinded down into, oh my gosh, what else can go wrong?
And he had a couple. I think he had like a drive, kind of like rim out. He had a shot rim out. Like it turns into that, But that's the thing where the effort has to always be there, and get to another part. So a Cook, I thought he was phenomenal again. 36 minutes. Brandon Murray 37 minutes. Primo Spears 39 minutes. He 30 minutes off the bench. What was different today, and it's going to happen, and I know being a coach is hard. You're a coach. No one's happy all the time. You can't make everyone happy all the time. But, Wayne Bristol, transfer from Howard. He's been part of the program. He's known as a pretty good defender. Jordan Riley, pretty good defender. Denver Anglin, he actually was a DNP coach's decision. The challenge to get more guys more minutes, and particularly if you're able to press, you're going to want that. But what would you have liked to seen from the bench? Because basically, he pretty much just went six deep. Riley kind of played like the last 4 minutes and makes his numbers look a little better. We saw Bradley Ezeriro. He made his debut ahead of Matumbo today, who was another DNP. And again, I'm not. This isn't Monday morning quarterback. You can't play 12 guys 25 minutes. I get it, but I think for this team to be successful, I think when someone's off, like Brandon Murray, I think that's where like Bristol's got to get some of those minutes, or Riley gets some of those. What do you think would be in a perfect world if the game is going in a way that is better than what it went in the second half? How would you see those minutes divvied up a little bit differently?
I think definitely with the closing out, and as long as Bristol is, I would have wanted to see Bristol in, whether it was for the Murray or for someone else. And there was room to put in the other the other young man that I always
England?
forget, not England, but Jordan Riley. I thought down the stretch, both of those guys could have played in down the stretch. And I understand this is game 3, and you don't want to lose a player for the rest of the season because of how you manage game 3. But I thought that Patrick had a chance to save Murray from himself, and he didn't save him from himself. And I thought it made it worse for Murray that he kept him out there as opposed to using one of those two. And I thought that Northwestern did him a favor after Nicholson was so good. The 7-footer was so good in the first half. Collins hardly played him in the second half.
A large individual.
Yeah, he's massive. And by Northwestern not going big, that would have opened up for Georgetown to kind of finagle with their lineup and not have necessarily a big lineup out there. So it gave them flexibility that I didn't think that Georgetown took advantage of.
Yeah. It just, I think after 3 games, they're going to play 31, 32 plus the Big East tournament. There's no proclamations to make after this. There's no, this is how it is, whatever. I think the biggest positive takeaway is the roster is better.
Yes.
Right? Like there's no argument. We can't even argue about that.
No, the roster is much better than what it's been.
Okay, the roster is better, but I just felt like even with a better roster, it seemed like for large parts of that second half, it was like I've been here before.
Yes.
I had shorter hair probably then. You know what I mean? Like, it just like that was, and it's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. The idea that like maybe Patrick went back to like what he's familiar with, like what he knows, just like we all kind of do when things are starting to sort of go downhill a little bit. But I think that was the struggle. I guess it was a struggle against Coppin State too, right?
Yeah.
A little bit where it's just like, if you can't guard the 3, just I don't know what you're doing.
Right. Right. And we discussed it a little bit after the game. The rotations aren't good when they are trapping. And it just seems like a simple fix. If you can wall off the middle and wall off the first pass and make them throw it all the way across the court, then you put them in a situation where they're trying to throw over a double team and they have to throw the ball more than one pass away. Georgetown seemingly traps, but they leave the guy one pass away open every time because the rotation isn't necessarily taking it out. It's in a position to guard against it if the ball is caught, as opposed to saying, we're not going to allow the ball to be caught. And there's a big difference in that strategy. So on the surface, it looks like, well, it's not working. Why are you still doing it?
Yeah.
And to me, it's one simple fix. You deny those 2 passes and you make them skip it. And then you close out, especially if you have the small lineup out there and Wahab is sitting down, then you close out. We see it all the time with Baylor. Baylor will put this defensive pressure on you, and then they wall, and then they close out to the baseline so well that you never feel like on offense you can get comfortable, and you never feel like you have an advantage. And I feel like for the first time in Ewing's tenure, he actually has players that are athletic enough to somewhat do that, but I'm not seeing him do that.
Yeah, I think there was like a little bit of a period. I mean, how long did that last? The year of the Great Exodus, where you did have Galen Alexander and you had Myron Gardner, you had Pickett, you had it's hard to remember everything, but they had that was definitely a deep team as well. But yeah, it just seems like there's more options. Dante Harris, obviously, still not part of the program. I would suggest that for fans, I think it's it's unlikely we see him again anytime soon, especially during the first semester.
Mhm.
So while that being said, how do you think that they can? I mean, obviously Primo, he was Big East honor roll, averaging 24 points. He had 22 today. Like he's able to do this. He's not gonna be able to play 39 minutes a game college basketball, right?
No, and at some point you're going to have to trust someone. So going back to your point earlier, I have to find 3, 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes in the first half for angling. And then maybe I need to find 3 or 5 minutes in the second half for angling during the non-conference schedule. I can't wait until the Big East schedule hits here
Well, see, that's the
and then
problem,
throw them in there.
right? But that's the problem when you have a Coppin State game that goes sideways.
Right.
Green Bay kind of went the way that it was supposed to. When they get back from Jamaica, you've got American here at 11:30 on a Wednesday, Thanksgiving Eve. But those are what those games are for, and that's I think the problem is that when you get into um, you know a shootout with Coppin State, who by the way has beaten Mount St. Mary's, they've beaten Navy, they're okay, but they probably needed that game. Um, we saw the kid from LSU, Bradley Ezewiro. So basically, this is the center lineup, the depth chart. And we talked about the second, but now.
Yeah.
So it's Wahab. Then you go to a Cook. He's your backup center, even though he's your starting four.
Yeah.
Then apparently we gave some time to Bradley today, and then you got Mutombo as your fourth center. Is that what's like the breakup of the 40 minutes of center that you think is best?
Well, I think going with the small lineup is best when a Cook is playing at center. I think this team plays much better when that's the case. He stretches out. He takes the big man away. He took Nicholson away from the basket. Now, Nicholson did have a couple of blocks on him on jump shots, but he takes it away. And I think it spreads the floor out for Georgetown. The problem with Qudus Wahab is there's no place to spread the floor on a team where now they have guys that need to get downhill. Now, when he was here before and you had the Blairs of the world, it would work that you throw it into him because it was 4 out, 1 in. Those guys really weren't going to beat people on the dribble. You wasn't looking for a lot of necessarily lanes for those guys. With this team, you need lanes for Spears. You need lanes for Murray. You need lanes for those guys. And you can't have it when you have the ability to cheat off of Qudus Wahab. And then that prompts Ewing to run a bunch of screen and rolls, which also clogs the lane up. So I just don't think right now that you bring Wahab back, but I don't think he necessarily fits with your strong pieces. And now you have Jay Heath here is another one. Yes, he can shoot the three, but he also, as you can see, drive the ball in the middle. So he's going to have to figure out how to use Wahab effectively with guys who need to get into the lane to be effective.
Well, I mean, you saw it last year at Maryland, out cover Maryland, and it took a little bit longer for Wahab's minutes to go down, but I mean, that's obviously why he's back. Let's be honest, okay? He left and he came back because he needed to go somewhere where he was going to play more. I think I tweeted at halftime that a Cook is approaching can't leave the court territory, and I think that's basically what happened in the second half. So if he does start at the 4 and then he becomes your 5, he doesn't leave the court.
Right.
He's had some injury problems. Who do you like at the 4 when a Cook is playing the 5? I mean, we saw Bristol for a minute. I think Bristol gives you something there.
And that's the guy who I would put in. I would definitely put in Bristol. And then again, you can work around the edges. So you put in Bristol and maybe you put in Wahab. And then you don't necessarily trap at the top. Or you use Wahab as a rim protector. And you say, all right, I'm going to use him as rim protection. Is he going to get fouls? Absolutely. But I'm going to live with the fouls he gets because I'm looking for between 18 to 23 minutes out of him and not between 30 and 35 minutes out of him. I just don't think that with this team and the components that you can get 30 to 35 minutes out of Q unless you're playing a real small team, which was the problem at Maryland during the out of conference. He was great because they were playing against small teams as soon as they got to the Big Ten and they played against bigger teams. He couldn't guard anyone. He couldn't score on anyone. Teams put him in screen and roll defense, and he can't defend screen and roll, and you can't play him.
Yeah. Well, I think between foul trouble and then matchup, I think his minutes just get dictated that way for the most part. That kind of happened against Coppin State. I figured he'd probably feast on them, and he did. He had a double-double in 15 minutes, but he just couldn't stay on the court. Are you going to Jamaica? I know. No, one day, I'd love for this team to get back involved in Battle for. Is it still the Battle for Atlantis? Is that still the name of
Yes,
it?
that is still
I'd love to go there. I mean, they used to be on that rotation of like, because each league kind of gets their team to send every. You can only go once every 4 years. At one point, I'd like to go to Maui, although basically it's like watching a game at like a gym smaller than Lake Braddock's.
Yes,
Um,
that is a tiny place.
Battle for Atlantis. Jamaica just not it's not working. I got asked today, are you going to Jamaica? And I was like, I don't know, are we? It doesn't seem like there's a budget in Kente Corner for that just yet. But yeah, no, thanks for coming on.
Sure
Do you have any parting shots at MTC with Mook?
Yep, that's it. The party shot is at least Georgetown is more palatable to watch offensively at times
Well,
where they got some talent.
I mean, if you basically all their starters plus Heath, I think could all go for 20 on any given night.
Yeah,
You know, and maybe we should stop talking about the defense. It's I gotta dig up my stats. I'm not ready yet.
right.
Can they get to 80?
Yeah,
That's where they're gonna live.
right, right. Yeah, and maybe it is the NBA mentality of you're just trying to get enough stops, not necessarily be this great defensive team, but get enough stops. And that comes to your point. If I want to have that mentality, then probably on the college level, I have to be 75 to 80 probably on most evenings.
No, I mean 63, which is what Georgetown scored tonight, is a score you can win in college basketball.
Yeah.
I mean, UVA does it like every damn night. Now that's obviously the extreme,
right? Yeah.
Right? But I mean, look, I mean, like you go through the record books, you go through all the Georgetown seasons, like you can win with 63. The problem is you got to play like a much higher level defense.
Yes.
And you got to really contest, and you can't just be giving up like this many threes because look, it's college basketball. Like a certain percent are going to go in, even if it's a low percent. The Coppin State didn't shoot well. I think they were 13 for 38.
Yeah.
They shot 43s.
Yep.
They're going to make some.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, we're gonna try to do these more often. Thanks a lot for coming on. Subscribe, like all that stuff. Kente Korner anywhere you can find your podcast. Send that Casual Hoya message if there's something going wrong. Make sure to follow Marcus for all of your, I wouldn't say basketball, but all of your sports needs. He's got it all covered. I don't even pay attention to the MMA stuff.
I don't do.
Oh, MMA. That's right. You don't.
I do boxing.
You do. Actually,
yeah, I don't do MMA.
I guess maybe I don't. I do like boxing, but I don't follow as much in depth as you. I'm more of like a big event. You get into like nuts and bolts of a boxing. Yeah, I think we're of the age where MMA is just a little bit just sort of not for us.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Yes, so don't follow for MMA, but anything else. And Friday, Montego Bay, 4:30, Georgetown, Loyola Marymount. We'll get another chance to get back in the win column. All right.